Today is how to adjust the front alignment on a Mark III Supra, 1986.5 to 92. This job today, guys, is a high degree of difficulty. This is very mentally challenging, very physically challenging, and definitely a huge safety aspect of what we're doing today. So if any point in time you do not feel comfortable, please do not attempt this. Leave it to the professionals. Follow along and see what the professionals are doing to set your alignment on your car. If you are like me, you like a challenge, you like doing things for yourself, and have had just an unbelievable difficulty in getting this car aligned properly at the shop, follow along with me today. We're going to show you how to get your car driving perfectly, okay? It's very tedious, don't get me wrong, it's not easy, but you can do it, okay? So we got 3 adjustment points on the front end of a Toyota Supra. Let me show you those adjustments. First adjustment is going to be your tie rod end, okay? It doesn't get much easier than this, guys. You're basically going to be loosening the lock bolt on your outer tie rod end and turning the inner tie rod end to either increase or decrease your toe, okay? These bolts on your lock bolt are usually either 14 or 13 millimeter. Your inner tie rod end is going to be a 14 millimeter, okay? Get it on there, right? There we go. Both of the tie rods on both front and left and right of your car are both right-hand threads. That means if I loosen the lock nut and I turn the inner tie rod in clockwise, threading it into the outer tie rod, that will shorten the length of this assembly, pulling the inner front of my wheel inward, causing more toe in. I turn the inner tie rod in counterclockwise, that will lengthen this assembly, pushing the front of the tire out, causing more toe out. Pretty simple. When you're all said and done, Toyota gives you a specification for these tie rod ends. The amount of threads exposed on both sides should be within 1.5 millimeters of each other. If they're not equal, that means either your steering wheel is not clocked straight or the input shaft to your rack and pinion is not clocked properly. One of those two will have to be corrected. Then you have to come back and set your tie rods. Now, setting your toe is always the last thing you do. Make any adjustments to caster or camber that will affect your toe, you always have to be reset. It's always the last thing you do, period, okay? The other 2 adjustments we have are 2 bolts, okay? 2 bolts. We have the front adjuster bolt on the lower control arm. We have the rear adjuster bolt on the lower control arm. You are going to use the front adjuster bolt to make your camber adjustments, okay? Essentially, the only way you're going to be able to make camber adjustments is through the use of this bolt. The rear bolt affects camber as well, but to a very small degree. It's not going to be used for adjusting camber, okay? Now this, like I said, you're going to use this to adjust your camber, but it actually has an equal and opposite effect on caster, okay? You know, we can't measure caster, and it really doesn't matter what it does to caster because it's the only way we can adjust camber anyway. So this is always going to be our first step, is to set our cambers using this front bolt. All right? Once you have that camber set, then you will go back and reset your toes. This is after you put the car back down on the ground and probably driven it a little bit, okay, to make sure that the suspension is settled properly. Come back in, measure your toe, set all your toes, and then you're going to drive the car. If your car drives perfectly fine, nice and straight down the road with no issues, leave this bolt alone, okay? if you're in a position like I was, where this bolt had without question had moved. Whenever I left the alignment shop, probably wasn't within a few miles, or I hit the first pothole, drove across the first driveway, this whole control arm moved back, all the way back. Did not tighten this bolt properly. So I had both my cambers set absolutely perfect, had both my toes absolutely perfect, and when I drove the car still had a severe pull that it had for years. The only option was to move this bolt that I knew had moved. So I incrementally moved this bolt, kept moving it, little at a time, rechecking my camber and my toe each time until the pull in my car went away. Okay? So what causes the pull is the differential of caster or camber. One of those two is what's causing your pull left or right. So I got that equalized so my car didn't pull. Everything was fine driving after that, except when I was going slow and tried to turn into a parking spot, then it became difficult. It caused too much steering effort, which the only reason there's too much steering effort is because of too much caster. So what I've gone and done, you can actually see where the camber bolt was in relation to those two white marks were lined up before. And I've moved both right and left side bolts equal amounts, actually back to the neutral position of that bolt. This is reducing my caster on both sides. That's what I've done. At this point, I'll have to remeasure my camber, reset all my toes, redrive the car, and see if it improved that hard steering effect when I'm driving slow. This is the kind of mentality and problem solving you're going to have to take if you have to move this rear bolt. You're going to have to use your instinct and of your drivability of your car to make any type of adjustments to this. Alright, now like I said, this bolt moved on me. That's pretty pathetic. That alignment shop did that. One bolt in my rear also moved as well. The reason that bolt moved is because it requires 177 foot-pounds of torque to tighten that bolt. Alright? This is the second hardest part about this job. Besides the mental aspect of figuring out what to do, is getting to tighten this bolt. I want to show you what it takes to access the front camber bolt. You have your choice to put on the head side. You can either use a 24 millimeter or a 15/16, whichever one you want. On the nut side of the bolt, let me get you a picture there. It's going to be either a 22 millimeter or 7/8, whichever one you want. Now, let me step back here. You can't even see the two breaker bars. This is incredibly difficult access. I'm a small person. It's everything I got to loosen that bolt that's tightened down that tight, move the adjuster bolt, retighten the nut while I'm holding the bolt in perfect position to where I want it to stay. This is the hardest part, okay? If you can't do this, maybe you need a friend that can help you hold one bolt while you tighten the nut, that sort of thing. It could make things easier. Definitely not easy, okay? Obviously, the alignment shop didn't even do it right. So let's look at these bolts a little bit closer, okay? This is what your bolt's going to look like right here. On your front adjuster bolts, you're going to see a hole in the top. When that hole is straight up and down, that's going to be your neutral position. From that position, you'll have 90 degrees to the right, it can move, or 90 degrees to the left. That's your range of motion. When you're actually moving this bolt, the bolt is actually sliding within a slot, back and forth within the frame, okay? If you loosen the nut and that bolt will not spin, that means it's locked up inside of your control arm. You're gonna have no choice but to drive that bolt out, clean the inner sleeve of your control arm out, clean the bolt out, and then put this back in with some good lubrication, and hopefully it'll spin on you. If it doesn't spin, that means you're not going to be able to make any adjustments. Now, somebody in the rear of my car absolutely destroyed two of these metal tabs that contain this eccentric washer. And I don't know if they sat here and beat on these things with a hammer or something. They just totally destroyed them. I had to literally take the bolt out and put it in from the other direction. So I had two guys left working to adjust my rear control arm in the rear of the car. Hopefully you don't have nothing stupid like that. And aside from being able to tighten that bolt that tight, the most important thing you need to do on these bolts is before you do any adjustment, clean off the entire frame around the bolt, clean off the bolt. These are likely to be covered in oil, grease, soot, undercoating, who knows what. Clean it off real good and make very accurate marks of where your bolt is in the relationship of that bolt to the frame. This is because this is very confusing, guys. You're under the car. Some bolts go in from the front. Some bolts go in from the back. Some you're going to be turning right. Some you're going to be turning left. It's very confusing. Very easy to move the bolt the wrong way. And if you do, you're going to know you did because you're going to show up in your measurements. And you can absolutely know where to go back to, and possibly the other direction, to correct your mistake. The other need for marking this is as soon as you try loosening that nut, guess what happens to this bolt? It moves, okay? You just immediately start loosening the nut and don't pay any attention to where you started from. You're going to start all over again because you have no idea how much this bolt actually moved, okay? All this stuff has to take into consideration. You got to be able to tighten it. You got to know exactly how much you move it by putting a good reference mark to know what we're doing. Okay. Now, I've created a kind of a cheat sheet for you here out of the Toyota service manual. I'll give you this crazy looking chart. It's really hard to understand. And basically, it's telling you what I'm showing you here. Okay. Front control arm, front lower control arm on the front suspension, on the front adjuster bolt. If I turn the control arm, the bolt, to move the control arm out, okay, so I'm not going to tell you left or right, because on the left side of the car, it's going to be one way. It's going to be the opposite way you're turning the bolt on the right-hand side of the car. What's important is we know that we're moving the control arm out, okay? If I do that, that will increase my camber and also decrease my caster. And you can see here, I'm giving you the relationship of how much. 1 degree of camber change will actually be 1.07 degrees of caster change, okay? Still, I have to use this bolt to set my camber, so I just can't really be bothered with this. It doesn't matter right now. If I remove the front control arm bolt, turn the bolt to move the control arm in, that will decrease my camber, increase my caster by the same relationship. All right? Everybody following what's happening here? This is going to tell you move your control arm in or out based on your camber measurements that you've made. If you have not enough camber, you're going to move the control arm out to increase it. If you have too much camber, you're going to move the control arm in to decrease it, okay? This is your first step you're always going to take. After you do this, go and reset your toe. Car drives fine, don't touch the rear bolt. If it doesn't drive fine, if you have a pull, well, then you're going to have to view your two bolts and make a decision about what to do. And this is how that bolt works. Same thing, if I turn the bolt to move the control arm out, left or right side, one's going to be turning it left, one's going to be turning it right. So as long as I'm moving it out, that's going to increase my caster, okay? It's going to very slightly decrease my camber. That relationship is a 1 degree of caster movement will only equal 0.075 degrees of camber. Very, very little. or in minutes, that's 60 minutes to 4.5 minutes. Very little decrease in camber by moving, very little change in camber by moving my caster bolt, the rear bolt. Literally, if you move this like 1 notch on that bolt, you probably won't even be able to measure your camber difference, okay? Once again, if I turn the bolt to move that control arm in, I will be decreasing my caster slightly, very, very slightly increasing my camber, okay? This is what I did. I moved both of my control arms in, the last adjustment I made to try to reduce my caster to eliminate this hard, stiff steering when I'm going slow, okay? So this is your cheat sheet. This is going to tell you what you need to do to make your adjustments, okay? Like I said, this is not easy. It's very tedious. Sometimes it might help to have a friend help you just to figure it out mentally. Took me quite a while, I'm not going to lie to you. But if you use my measurement methods that I told you, there's absolutely no reason why you can't get your cambers and your toes set perfectly, okay? In my alignment measurement videos, I show you how to do this. Both your camber and your toe. At this point, we can use our intuition of how the car is driving to determine if we need any adjustment to the caster, okay? Last resort, guys, take it to the alignment shop and have them print out your measurements for you and tell you where you're at. I'm trying to give you a way around that and a way to do it on your own. And I have utmost confidence in you. If you can follow along with what I'm saying, then you can make these adjustments. The hardest part, like I said, is going to be loosening that nut, making the very minor adjustments to the bolt, and then tightening the nut back without the bolt moving on you. Okay, it's going to be the hardest part. This will help you know what to do. The physical part, well, that's going to be up to you. All right? I have confidence that you can do it. You can do what I did, guys. You can make your car drive beautifully. I promise. You can do it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Appreciate you. Okay, I promised you an update on the resetting of both of my rear bolts, my 2 caster bolts on the front of my car back to the neutral position. This did exactly what I needed it to do. Okay, it reduced my steering effort. I went for a quick drive, made a couple quick sharp turns left and right, trying to turn the steering wheel quickly to see if I could make the problem come back that I was having before, and everything is great. After I came back, I reset up my laser level, and like I told you before, I literally can't measure the difference in my camber from left and right. It's so little difference, and I probably moved my caster according to the chart from Toyota that I'm going to show you here in a minute. It maybe a degree or slightly over a degree. I moved my caster. I decreased my caster on both sides. So I'm going to show you this chart, and I'm going to walk you through again once I had both my cambers and toes set perfectly, what I did to go through this caster adjustment. Okay, since we can't measure, I want to walk through it, but I'm going to show you this chart on the side while I'm talking. So like I said, I had a pretty severe pull in the car, even after both my cambers and toes were set perfectly. So I know that's not the cause of my pull, the camber is not. So I could tell, it was obvious in my car that this suspension arm had shifted backwards. So I never touched the passenger side. I never messed with it, okay, because it seemed to be okay as far as I could tell. Can't measure it. And all I did was incrementally increase the caster over and over until the pull in my car went away. And once that pull went away, it turns out that both of my adjuster bolts were in the exact same position when I was done. Okay, both of them. They look the same. Both of my bolts, the center hole of mine, were angled inward almost 45 degrees. Both left and right side angled inward. Okay, if you can see that chart that I just showed you, it's going to show you how basically a 5-degree range of adjustment on caster. So I'm almost half of that I'm on one side. That would be 2.5 each way, 2.5 degrees each way. I probably moved at least a good 1.25 degrees moving these back to neutral. Now, one thing I want to say about this, guys, if you've gone through the effort of a job like replacing all of your suspension bushings like I did before my last alignment, to just get by, you could probably more than likely come and set all 4 of your cam bolts to the neutral position and have a pretty decent driving car. Right now my car drives beautifully. Both of my caster bolts, the rear bolts, are set perfectly neutral. Both of my cambers are set just a fraction more than the factory setting of 10 minutes. I might be at somewhere between 15 to 18 minutes at most. And both of my front camber bolts are literally only adjusted off center about that much. I mean, it's about one of the tiniest markings that's on your bolt. One bolt is moved that much one way, one bolt is moved that much the other way. I'm almost on center. Moving either one of those to perfectly center would still have both cambers almost perfectly where they're supposed to be. It would change it that little if I moved those. If you're totally lost, starting from scratch on all your front end alignment, put everything to neutral. And you're probably going to have a decent driving car. All you really need to do is set your toe. Okay, that'll at least get you to the alignment shop safely. I promise you. It's going to do it. Okay, so that's my update, guys. I want to make sure you know you can use the feel of our car to be able to adjust this. Okay, what probably actually happened in my car was the passenger side bolt. When I actually set it back to neutral, I could tell the nut wasn't as tight as it should have been. So probably that side had moved as well, but in the side of increasing caster. So when I used this bolt to equalize the two to get rid of the pull, I probably ended up with both of them set too high. Okay, this is what I could tell from driving the car. Too much steering effort when I'm driving slow. Our car drove beautiful straight, no problem. All I've done is come back and lowered my caster based on my knowledge of how it works to a neutral position. Eliminated my steering effort problem. Car still drives perfectly straight, extremely well balanced. You can do the same thing for your car, guys. You can do all of these steps. I promise you, you can do it. Just takes a little time and effort and a lot of thought. Get a buddy to give you a hand, thinking through it all, and maybe helping you adjust the bolts. That'll be a good thing too. So anyway, I promise you an update. Didn't want to leave you hanging. Thanks for watching.